From ideas to implementation, our next session focuses on building climate solutions that last, from vision to scale. Our session chair is Devikaa Nanda, Senior Manager at SLP Sustain Labs Paris, based in UK. Over to you, Devikaa.
Thank you so much, Rita. Without much ado, I will jump right in. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Devikaa, and at Sustain Labs Paris, I work on venture building from strategy to implementation. Hope the sessions so far have left you with plenty of food for thought and more for action. Certainly, this fireside chat will inspire to act and build, because that is what our speakers for this session are best at. Also, we have an announcement for an exciting opportunity that we will share at the end of this fireside chat. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chatterji, CEO of Sustain Labs Paris, and Rajesh Swaminthan, partner at Khosla Ventures. As CEO of Sustain Labs Paris, Miniy has been creating and building sustainable ventures across frontier innovation, education, and environment, backed by her prior experience as Chief Sustainability Officer at Jindal Steel, as being in the senior management of the World Economic Forum, and her career in investment banking at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, HSBC, and Merrill Lynch. She is also an author. At Khosla Ventures, Rajesh is a partner investing in company building in all areas associated with the climate sector, from industrial decarbonization to compute infrastructure. He was earlier at Applied Ventures and Bell Labs. He also holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and an engineering degree from IIT Madras. Thank you for joining us, Miniy and Rajesh, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that we can't wait to hear what comes out of this conversation. So let's jump right into addressing the topic for today, from vision to scale, building climate solutions that last. I'm sure the audience would love to hear where they should be spending their time ideating and building. So to the both of you, my first question is this. What are the 3 top climate themes or technologies you are most excited about as investors? Miniy, would you like to take that first?
Thank you, Devikaa. And that's a great question. And I'm curious to hear about Rajesh and see how our thoughts align. The last 3 years, 4 almost, have been in the Middle East. And I moved to Dubai. And I think I realized more than ever how important it is to invest in resilient food systems, water tech, and of course, decarbonization solutions like carbon capture, utilization, including direct air capture, which is still very nascent, but something that people can put their money to. But over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you. Thanks, Devikaa. Nice to connect, Miniy. I think I'll look at it as 3 themes, and I'll jump into some technologies. The first is, I think these days you can't start a conversation without saying AI or data center. But that's not what we're focused on. But if you look at AI and data center, there is tremendous need for energy and clean energy. So geothermal and fusion are the only 24/7 baseload power. So we are very bullish on that. Second theme, I would say, is kind of energy security. That's a very, very critical one. It's not just about powering the energy, but it's also things like critical minerals and even things like hydrogen, particularly for countries like India. When the war kind of a situation develops with Ukraine or Iran, you worry about the natural gas. So even our oil and gas petrochemical refining is at risk if we can't get enough natural gas into the system. So that's a big one for us. Third one, I would say, Miniy said it rightly, is like, how do you take some of the emissions from many of these industries and find something valuable out of it? So things like sustainable aviation fuels are a huge opportunity. And those are kind of the 3 themes, I would say, but plenty of sectors that we are investing into these days.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think from both of you, I heard the topic of uncertainty and complexity around current events coming across. Since January 2025, it's been particularly challenging for entrepreneurs building climate solutions. So I want to ask both of you this. What would your message be for them, just in terms of dealing with that uncertainty?
Happy to take this one. I would say uncertainty creates opportunity. There is a lot of uncertainty around what is happening in Iran, but uncertainty around how is AI going to affect the data centers are going to affect. There is tremendous amount of tailwinds that come with these uncertainties. If you look at the energy stocks, they've all gone up, but what goes up comes down. But if you really look at it long term, these things can happen. These things can be repeated. So we look at how do you secure the energy in a big way, and that's where China's imposing bans on even solar panels, right? So when you think about it, every country, whether it's India or US, need to make sure we are developing our own capability in whether it's solar panels or EVs or SAFs or many of these industries. The other thing I would say is climate tech is truly global. So many of the technologies may be getting developed in US or Europe or India, but it's the way you scale is truly global. So when I look at many of our companies that develop the technology within the US, now we are actively working with many of the large conglomerates in India and a lot of partners in India to scale up these technologies. And the urgency has only increased just in the last month or two, which is, like I said, change is an opportunity. We have to ride the tailwinds and make sure these are all opportunities where we can deploy the solutions. And look for the team resiliency as well. Like, who do you add to the team? How do you build the team to buffer these kind of headwinds that come into the industry? Bring people from other sectors, not just people who have been in the R&D world, but people who have built businesses, so who understand these geopolitical risks over a period of time. So those things are all something we've been working with our companies, with our teams in a big way. So that's all being very, very helpful. On to you, Miniy.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think when there is uncertainty and dealing with ambiguity, it almost forces you to think about reinvention. It makes you think about, as Rajesh said, what are the opportunities? These are my strengths. The situation, the context has changed. How do I work this towards still coming up tops? So, I think that, and personally, that excites me a lot as well. So when there is uncertainty, things are, that's when you rethink and reconfigure almost. I think the second thing is also efficiency. When things are business as usual, there are a lot of inefficiencies with setup in organizations and even in the system as well. So during these times, as difficult as it might be, but then it does force you to kind of shake up and clean up and reduce those inefficiencies. And then I think last year and also this year with the conflict in the Middle East, it's okay to ride the wave. You don't have to. You can adjust within the system rather than changing what you're doing. So adjust within the system, because patience goes a long way in riding that wave, because things again get back as well. And certain hasty decisions or a lot of talking about the cleanup, right? A lot of people left the climate space since last year and all of that. It does clean up the system, but then also, it's okay to stay and wait, and things again get back, and then you would be a reinvented version of your own self as an organization.
Thank you. So I mean, I'm hearing resilience, the importance of a resilient team. Strength in dealing with that uncertainty, knowledge of what you're dealing with, and of course, efficiency. All of these point to key ingredients that are required to transform a great idea into scaled implementation. But I'd love to hear more from both of you on what other key ingredients in your experience. Rajesh, you've led multiple companies to successful exits. Miniy, you've been steadfast in your commitment to sustainability, building across different ventures. Education, which is something that I personally feel is the backbone of moving forward. What other key ingredients would you advise those who have these ideas in place to take them to scaled implementation? Yeah. Rajesh?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with it. I think the biggest ingredient for us is the size of the impact. Vinod actually wrote an article in 2020 where we said we'll only care about a dozen entrepreneurs who will change the world. By that, we meant there are only 10, 12 sectors that will really change the needle. And those are the only things that are worth working for. Otherwise, no matter how hard we work, it doesn't make an impact. It doesn't change the world in a big way. So starting with that impact matters a lot. And that impact means sectors like fusion, geothermal, cement, steel, electric vehicles, so things that move the needle for climate. So once you start there, the next critical one that we focus on is what we call it as a Chindia price. We care a lot about techno-economics. We don't do fancy spreadsheets on IRR, cash on cash, and all that stuff. And we do the seed stage, Series A, Series B investments, because those things really don't matter. What matters is whether you are developing a highly differentiated technology that's got a cost entitlement to be able to serve the markets in India and China. And that's been kind of the principal guiding mantra for us. So when I look back at the peak of climate investments in the US between 21 and 25, when all kinds of premiums and IRA taxes and tax credits were coming in, pretty much none of our investment memos had anything to do with IRA, tax credits, green premium, 45Q, 45X, all those buzzwords. Not that we were expecting a different administration that will take many of these things away, but having invested in climate, we know this thing goes up and down. So you can't depend on these green premiums when you're betting on technology and get caught in the hype. So the techno-economics is something we care a lot about, and we religiously talk about this with all the companies that we talk to, whether they're expensive or not. This is something we literally preach and make sure founders are betting on technologies that will scale quickly and have a fundamental entitlement to lower cost. The third one, we spend a lot of time in evaluating the technologies to make sure they can be scalable, is whether many of these can integrate into existing infrastructure. By that, I mean not incremental solution that you can just slap onto existing infrastructure. We look for highly differentiated ideas, very disruptive technologies, but the opportunity to integrate and leverage existing infrastructure is super critical. And that's how you really scale a business. I'll give you an extreme example. Even when we are looking at nuclear fusion, our view was fusion is something that's an energy source, but you should be able to integrate this into a coal boiler plant. Like, how do you integrate a fusion technology as equivalent of a coal boiler into a coal plant? By that, you are leveraging an existing infrastructure of a coal plant, all the interconnection that happens, all the turbines that exist. So that's an extreme example of how to think about integration. But there are plenty of other examples. We have a solar company that's actually working a lot with companies in India, where they're putting a perovskite on glass, and you just put the glass on the hundreds of gigawatts of solar silicon cell factories that are available there. You increase the efficiency by 30%. That's a huge delta for an efficiency improvement for minimal capex, and you integrate into existing facilities. We have a cement company that's actually can integrate into any of the cement plants. It's a highly differentiated technology. They take the CO2 coming out of the cement plant, put it back into the calcium oxide, make a cementitious material, and because you're adding CO2 back to the cement material, you're actually increasing the throughput of an existing cement plant. Now, what does that do for a factory? It increases margin because you're increasing the throughput significantly. Whereas there are other cement ideas where people have said, hey, CO2 is bad, let's go after and create new materials. Guess what? The industry doesn't adopt a completely new material just because you came up with a fancy technology. So there needs to be a much better respect for how do you integrate with existing industries and reduce the time to market and scale faster. It's not really a David versus Goliath story. It's a David and Goliath story. That's how we look at it for many of the things that we're implementing. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Rajesh. So I'm going to take the position of put myself in the feet of an entrepreneur. So if I were to be building, if I have a great idea, maybe it might be useful to the audience here. If I have a great idea, how do I make sure that that vision then converts into tangible outcomes and scale? So the first thing when what I've seen is that it's the business model driving the idea. Just one great idea doesn't mean much. What's your business model which is driving that idea? How resilient is that business model? As Rajesh said, interconnectivities, how does it fit into existing structures? That's very important. So, the business model itself is extremely important when you think of a great idea. The second is the ecosystem. especially in our field. There's, I mentioned carbon capture, for example. Many countries, they don't have the policy frameworks. I talked about resilient food systems. So novel foods, for example, they need specific certifications and all of that, right? So the ecosystem, working the ecosystem, how fickle or strong is the subsector that you're in. So these are in that is very important. Even when you're expanding one geography to another geography, to choose that carefully. So the ecosystem is extremely important. Then, of course, the team. So, the team that you build around you. Rajesh mentioned this as well. Complementarity rules. If you get people who are mirror images of yourself, you're getting nowhere. To bring in people with diverse perspectives. And again, that's a challenge in our field, because, and Devika, you mentioned education, right? So there are the supply of technically skilled people in this field is largely lesser than the demand for such people. So how do you hire? How do you hire people who are beyond PowerPoint presentations and who can actually roll up their sleeves? And many of these people have learned over the years because of the lack of formal education systems yet in this field. So the team is extremely important. And then finally, being nimble, and it links back to your question, Devika, about certain and there are certain incidents last year and then this year with the conflicts and all of that. So these are scenarios which you have to be prepared for. So you have when you're starting an organization, you have to be prepared for that things will not always remain the same. The status quo would change. So right from the start, how do you build those systems to be nimble, keeping up the learning curve? Again, in our sector, that's very pertinent because there are always new technologies. Rajesh mentioned, for example, biofuels. There is a cement as well. It's a great example of how from a carbon intensive sector it's moved now become mainstream to be sustainable. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. So keeping up the learning curve, being nimble. And I think that really comes by setting up a continuous feedback loop with the organization and the ecosystem and the market and the new technologies which are emerging. So just some practical things which make a great idea, but then how do you to tangibly be successful.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the two perspectives as an entrepreneur and as an investor. That was nice, and thank you, Rajesh, for sharing those examples as well. Miniy, you mentioned about being nimble, and Rajesh, you spoke about the need for integration into existing systems. How do you see that playing out in this the theme of the summit, which is can AI truly be net positive for the planet? Would you view AI as a friend or foe for climate entrepreneurs? And Rajesh, I'd love to hear from you first, and Miniy, I'd love to hear your views thereafter. Thank you.
Sure, happy to share our thoughts. Full disclosure, we were the first institutional investor in OpenAI in 2018, and we were also the earliest investor in Sarvam, which we are super excited about in India. So you can expect me to be biased, but I'll tell you why AI is a phenomenal friend for climate entrepreneurs. Number one, the data centers on AI are driving the biggest need for energy today and renewable energy. Whether you look at even the US, where administration appears to be against anything that's like climate tech and so on, there is tremendous need for solar and batteries that are picking up pace here. So that's a hugely positive. The government is also hugely supportive of geothermal and fusion, because where else do you get so much energy over the next couple of decades of energy needs? So I think that's a hugely positive thing as far as the demand that AI is creating. But even more importantly, AI is also turbocharging the technology development that's happening in the climate industry. We have some phenomenal companies using AI to actually accelerate discoveries of materials around magnets, around batteries, and even around high temperature superconductors. Like, this is going at a phenomenal pace. And this is not sugarcoating AI into everything. Like I've been a material scientist, I've been investing in deep tech for 18 years. There are a lot of combinatorial chemistry companies that have happened in the past, but that's nowhere close to the power of AI that's coming in to discover these materials. A lot more industries where AI is making an impact in climate. Even our nuclear fusion company, we have two. One is Commonwealth Fusion, the other is Rialta. Both of them are using AI to actually speed up the thousands of iterations they can do in a week, in a month for plasma stability. Like how do you improve the overall reaction capability, the plasma stability, and all of that stuff? And that's making a phenomenal impact on how fast they are able to advance the technology. If you look at the critical minerals, we have companies that are actually using AI to discover, to prospect, to identify the mining sites much faster. There are companies that are bringing in AI into these mining industries to move these industries significantly faster, right? And we have companies in autonomous driving. That's all related to sensor fusion and AI. So the pace with which these things are moving is just excellent. We have a AI for Grid company, AI for Grid company called Pravav, based out of Stanford, that's actually working with multiple states in India to actually develop a foundational intelligence for the grid. That's a phenomenal way in which it can contribute to India. So I'm fully biased towards being positive. I don't see a downside in terms of what AI is doing for climate. You can take the argument it's creating a lot of energy needs, like where does energy come from? It's energy consumption, water consumption. That's all absolutely true. But that's what is creating the opportunity for the energy security and investments into these energy sectors much faster, which otherwise would have fallen behind. Go ahead.
Okay, that's a very provocative question, Devika, and great to hear from you, Rajesh, about all the great work investments that you've made in the sector. So I'm very bullish as well. So, especially in the field of R&D. So, the acceleration in R&D because of AI is phenomenal. In material sciences, for example, AI can just screen millions of structures, molecular structures, to find new battery chemistries and at a huge discount, about 10 to 20% of the traditional cost. And then again, operational efficiency as well. There are startups and various new technologies that use AI to reduce building HVAC emissions and to slash them down by about 40-50%. So these are, I think, massive benefits which we could have never done manually ourselves. So there's also lots of examples for grid optimization. For example, you have companies such as Dexter Energy, and they use ML to forecast renewable energy supply and demand, as Rajesh said. That there is a lot of linkages with renewable energy as well. Now, however, of course, the elephant in the room is that data center electricity use is projected to triple by 2030. So that is something which a lot of people are working on. You can't deny it; it is there. And then I also, to that, wanted to add that, of course, AI to the common user is a great asset as an analytical engine that compresses a lot of research. But I think in our field, it is not there yet because, I think AI needs to evolve more and become more mature to be able to be a reliable tool for research in our field.
Thank you so much. Really insightful. We do have a question around AI from the audience. Aresha asks, do investors risk limiting bold innovation in AI, and how do you strike the right balance? Either of you, Rajesh, would you like to go first?
I think we're taking enough risk in both AI and climate. We put a large check in OpenAI, like I said, 2018. We are investing significantly in AI. We are investing in AI and material science and all of that stuff. We are not shying away from taking risks in climate investments as well. So we're not trying to balance both. I mean, interestingly, we incubated and invested in Commonwealth Fusion, which is the highest risk investment you can make, because nuclear fusion, nobody wanted to touch it 7-8 years ago. It's roughly around the same month we decided to invest in OpenAI as well. So it's interesting to see both of these are coming together. I do think both of these will be trillion-dollar companies. The timing may be a little bit apart in terms of when these get to. It just shows where AI is, where energy is. But the end game, in terms of the impact they both have, is just phenomenal. So we will continue to take high-risk investments in both those sectors because the world demands it.
Thank you, Rajesh. I do understand there's a paucity of time, and I think I want to end on an optimistic note and also address Ash's question from the audience about climate ventures in the global south and how backing them is different. But in relation to that, I'd love to ask another question, which is that there are investors in the diaspora interested in investing in climate solutions. But this is very fragmented. It's been quite fragmented so far. So how can they collaborate? If you could each just take a few seconds to summarize your final thoughts and also answer that question, it would be much appreciated.
Go ahead, Mini.
Okay. So I really like that question, by the way, about the climate ventures in developing economies, because the problems are quite different, in developing economies. And oftentimes, climate and environment related problems are married to a lot of social and equity related issues as well. So, so that's why the solutions need to be different too. So it's a great question. I think that we in the last few years, it's been amazing to see that there have been homegrown developing country based investors and also climate philanthropy. Climate philanthropy, for example, in India, it's great to see that how it has flourished. So I think that ecosystem is coming up. But then I'll again go back to the supply of people who are making these, and again, as you can see, I'm very passionate about that, about upskilling people on building the right technical skills rather than PowerPoint and compliance and all of that. So I think that needs to be worked on more for young people and people, to be able to come up with solutions which matter, which work, which can scale. So that's one piece. And then coming to your question, I think absolutely, Devika, it's a great question that there are investors in climate, serious investors. After last year, I think a lot of people have moved, sorry, Rajesh, to AI from the climate sector. And the ones who stayed are probably very serious. And there is a need for sharing of experiences and definitely sharing of technical expertise as well. Because the climate sector is very cross-sectoral, and every time it crosses with specific sectors and even geographies, it demands new versions of itself. So I think having a platform, and maybe Amita can help us create that across the diaspora, where investors can speak to each other, share expertise, what they are seeing, and then also I think it will lead to risk reduction and definitely scalability as well, and just identification of people who people who are doing good stuff and need that bit of support.
Yeah, I agree, and I see climate companies growing really well both in US and in India. I see more of innovations, early stage, high risk technologies getting developed in the US, fundamentally because the US has spent a lot of money in that area. There is a lot of research work there. And India has historically been more focused on the IT side of things. So not like fundamental science that got developed, but that's changing quite a bit. I'm very happy to see that in terms of how India is investing. Just like India kind of overshot the Western world with both in fintech, with what Aadhaar and other things have done, as well as in telecom. The mobile adoption happened pretty quickly compared to a lot of the Western countries. I do think India has a huge role to play in the energy as well. So a lot of the technologies we're developing in the US have the ability to scale faster actually in India. So I'm certainly looking forward to building that bridge and making that connection happen. And it's more opportunistic when I meet with Indian investors who are interested in climate. So there is a better forum where we can all engage and discuss like how do we build this, how do we bridge these technologies and scale up what is so critical for India and what is truly critical for the world. Climate is a global problem. See, carbon emissions is everywhere. So it doesn't matter where you build this and capture it and address it. We have to build it everywhere. So there is tremendous opportunity for how we should be doing this better and remove the inefficiency and the friction.
Thank you so much, Miniy. Thank you so much, Rajesh. This was really insightful. I'm sure it's left the audience with plenty to think about, as was promised, and plenty to act upon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the audience for listening. And on that note of collaboration, Miniy, I just want to thank you very much for the opportunity that funds outstanding women leaders across the Indian diaspora who are combating climate change through the Indiaspora Women in Climate Scholarship. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, sure. So, you would have figured in the last 25 minutes that I'm very invested in climate education. And one of the things that I feel personally very grateful for was the opportunity to create India's first university level program, a BTech in climate change. India needs 100 more, but at least I feel I've at least created the first, which can then be multiplied. And on that note, what we also do is that we work with climate leaders so that there is a snowballing effect of what they learn with us and then go back into their organizations and take those learnings forward. And it also gives them a sort of a tribe. It gets them to meet with more people globally, and some of the things that you talked about, Devika and Rajesh, those collaborations then get catalyzed. So very happy to announce the Indiaspora Women in Climate Scholarship, so which grants a 100% tuition waiver for the SLP Climate Leadership Certificate to support outstanding women leaders in the diaspora who are doing their bit for climate change. So you have the QR code here. Amita's going to send you this as well to all the audience. And feel free, of course, to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you, Devika.
Thank you, Devika. Thank you, Miniy. I'll invite Preeta.